to Language of the Month. This month we're celebrating a country in Western Asia, which is home to this lovely landmark in its capital, Tehran. It borders 7 different countries and 3 bodies of water. Its emblem is this. The language spoken here has a variety of names and is spoken in lots of neighbouring countries too. Can you guess which country I'm talking about? Well done if you guessed Iran. Let's look at where it is in the world. Their language is called Persian. It's sometimes known as Farsi, and versions of it called Dari and Tajik Persian are spoken in Afghanistan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Letters in Persian are very different to those in English. Those children who speak Urdu might recognise some of the letters and sounds, as Urdu derives from this Persian lettering. Let's hand over to Anita, who's going to tell us how to introduce ourselves in Persian.
The most commonly used informal greeting is salam. Salam. Salam means hi or hello. We use it when we meet someone or enter a room with people in it. We can use it as a greeting almost anywhere. First, let's see how Persian people introduce themselves in an informal situation. Salam, man Anita'am. Az didanet khoshbakhtam. Hi, I'm Anita. Nice to meet you. Salam, man Anita'am. Az didanet khoshbakhtam. Start by saying salam, which means hi. Then say man, I, your name, and then am, which means to be or am. Salam, man Anita'am. Persian word order is different than English. Word for word, this literally means hi, I, Anita, am. Finally, say az didanet khoshbakhtam. This means nice to meet you. Salam, man Anita'am. از دیدنت خوشبختم.
How we speak to people is different depending on who they are. Think about how you would talk to a friend on the playground and how you might speak to a teacher in the class. In language, we call this different levels of formality, and every language has it, and it changes the vocabulary that you use. Here's Anita to explain more.
After salam, we almost always say, "How are you?" when we greet friends or close relatives. It might seem strange to say it every time, but this is a part of normal everyday conversation in Persian. Let's try out the informal way of saying hello, how are you? Salam, chetori. Chetori. The I in chetori makes this sentence second person. The formal way becomes slightly longer. Add hale shoma, which means your health. Salam, hale shoma chetore. Hale shoma chetore. Hale shoma chetore literally means how is your health? In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use good manners as you thank people. Let's get started. There are several ways to thank someone. The formal way is خیلی ممنون. خیلی ممنون. Mamnun means thank you, and خیلی means a lot. So خیلی ممنون is like saying thank you very much. خیلی ممنون.
Now we're going to try and use some of this vocab with some people around us in our class. It doesn't matter if you don't say it perfectly, it's great just to have a go. Salam, man Miss Smitham, ashtidanet kushbaktam. Now it's your turn. Folk tales throughout the world share common features. As an example, variations of the Cinderella story exist in multiple languages and countries. Persian tales are no different. This traditional story shares ideas with the European folktale The Valiant Little Tailor. Enjoy! There was once a man called Mohammed who was a shawl weaver. One day he was sitting behind his shawl, weaving away, when he saw two mice playing about and riding on each other's back. As he threw the shuttle into his warp, it slipped from his hand and hit the two mice, killing both of them in one blow. At that point, all Mohammed's fellow apprentices began to laugh at him and say, "Bravo, well done, your name should be Tirandaz," which means arrow shooter. Mohammed of the bow, slaying with his arrow 2 lions at one blow. "Why do you sit here weaving shawls? You ought to be an archer." Mohammed listened to these words and took them seriously, so he rose up from his work and went home to his own house. He got a little money from his mother and took it to the bazaar to buy a bow and arrows for himself. On the bow and arrows he made them write, "I am Mohammed Tirandaz, Mohammed of the bow, slaying with my arrow 2 lions at one blow." Then he threw the bow and arrows over his shoulder and set off for the desert. He went on for a good way and arrived thirsty and weary at the edge of a stream of water. He quenched his thirst, hung his bow and arrows in the fork of a tree, then lay down under its shade and fell asleep. When he was still sleeping, one of the king's horsemen came riding by and chanced to pass close to the foot of the tree. There he saw a strong, sturdy youth, asleep, his bow and arrows hung above his head. The horseman was amazed at the strong appearance of the young man and came up to look at his weapons and saw what was written on them. "I am Mohammed Tirandaz, Mohammed of the bow, slaying with my arrow 2 lions at 1 blow." "What business brings you here then?" asked the horseman. "I came into the desert to do a little hunting." "Good, and are you a really good shot?" To this Mohammed replied, "Yes, although he had never fired a bow and arrows." "Then I shall take you with me to the king, and you shall be one of the king's household, and then some day when war happens to break out, you can fight for the king." "Right you are," said Mohammed. Now the horseman brought him into the king's presence and explained, "This is Mohammed Tirandaz the archer, who slays 2 lions at 1 blow." Then the king gave Mohammed a gift and an appointment in his household. So Mohammed made himself at home there, and day or night his only work was to eat and sleep, which was really just as well, for there was nothing else that he knew how to do. So things went on until one day war broke out and an enemy's army came and besieged the city of the king. Immediately Mohammed Tirandaz was summoned, and the king said, "Now, you'd better go out and fight." Mohammed could do nothing but agree, and so he said, "With pleasure." They brought a horse for him to mount to ride out to the battlefield. Mohammed, who hadn't the faintest idea how to ride, was afraid that no sooner would he mount than the horse would throw him to the ground. So he said, "Tie my feet tightly together under the horse's belly." The grooms marvelled greatly, but they thought he must be going to perform some wondrous exploit, since he bade them do this strange thing. So they tied his feet as he had said. He slung his bow and arrows on his back and took the reins and set out for the battle. On the way, the bridle slipped from his hand, the horse bolted with him and began to gallop. In their wild career, they came near a tree, and Mohammed, in great fear, stretched out his arm to clutch it, to try and stop himself. As he grasped it, the force of the galloping horse tore it up by the roots, and on they dashed. Mohammed waving the tree and shouting, "Catch the reins! Catch the reins!" in the hope that someone would stop his horse. Now the army of the other side, when they saw a champion galloping towards them, waving a tree, were terrified, for they thought there must be an army of the king's men coming up behind them to cut off their retreat, to whom Mohammed was calling, and that he meant catch the enemy's reins and prevent them escaping. So from sheer terror, they turned tail and retreated. Meanwhile, the king's army galloped up and defeated them. The grateful king gave many presents and robes of honour to Mohammed Tirandaz the archer, and he was appointed commander-in-chief of the king's armies. Thank you, or Hayley Mamnoon, for listening and joining in with our Language of the Month Assembly this week. It's been great to share some culture from another country. Have a great week.